The first thing one must understand when they're looking at my work is that it's not simply an exhibit. I think of my work as a project that deals with the migration patterns of black people, what happens to their traditional culture when they leave the rural area and come to the urban areas, how those traditions change, how new ones come about, what happens to the quality of life for people. And so I am hoping that through my work, I can help people better look at themselves and gain a better understanding of their traditional folk life practices. One of my biggest concerns now is the use of photo documentation for historical preservation in the study of culture. The use of the camera as an adjunct to the study in culture can be invaluable when it comes to preserving what is still available for future generations. The fact that a photograph is still worth 1,000 words. When we start explaining to our young today and our grandchildren tomorrow about the times in which we are living and that our parents have lived in, they may have many questions. If you have a photograph that is constructed well, that gives you enough information about that period, then your chances of explaining to that generation are a lot greater. Right now in America, it's very popular for a lot of folk scholars and people in anthropology and people in art to try to make a comparison between what is happening in traditional black art and folk culture and what is happening in Mother Africa. It's a given that when black people were uprooted from Mother Africa and brought to this country, with them they brought traditions in basket making, blacksmithing, wood carving, and even quilting as far as that goes, that had been handed down in Mother Africa for centuries. One of the things that happened with black people when they came to America, of course, they had to adapt whatever skills they had to materials that were available here, you see. So where a man may make baskets in Nigeria out of some sort of weed or reed, in Mississippi, people make a lot of baskets out of pine needles because there are a lot of pine trees. A lot of people make baskets out of white oak. It's all depending on how one is going to use the basket. As we race rapidly into the 21st century, many of the traditional crafts, the traditional folk life practices are vanishing. One of the reasons they are vanishing is people no longer are practicing them. But if you look very hard and go through the backwoods, you can find people who are still practitioners of traditional crafts. Quilters, there are many people still around quilting, but they're generally people over 50. It's a lot simpler for a young woman today to go buy a blanket from the store than to take the time that it takes to sit down and piece up the top of a quilt and then roll it up on a quilting frame and then stick the needle through all 3 levels and quilt it. And so you find some of the senior citizens or the older black people who still have a tremendous love for this tradition. You find them doing it, but you don't find a lot of young people doing it. There are some people who are young who are interested, but for the most part, it's the older people who still do this. When that generation of quilters pass on, there just won't be any more. I'm quite fond of old people, and I listen a lot to what they have to say because they've spent all of these years storing up wisdom and knowledge, and many young people really don't go to them enough and draw on this tremendous reservoir of wisdom and knowledge. And so I've learned a lot by sitting and listening, and it's helped me tremendously in my work. In Roxon, Mississippi, lives a lady by the name of Miss Annie Mason, who is in her 80s. One day, Miss Annie Mason and I were sitting in her bedroom, and she went into a drawer and pulled out a very old Bible. Traditionally, most people, black and white in America, before people could get birth certificates, would record when someone was born and when someone died in the family Bible. And so she brought out this old book and began to show me how the history of the family had been recorded in the Bible. She told me this neat story that one of her uncles used to sleep with this Bible under his head. For years, he did this because his mother told him to always keep the Bible close to him. So it was passed on to her. This uncle thought enough of her and her sense of family history to make her the keeper of this Bible. She is one of the few people who I met who has a tremendous sense of historical preservation of her family roots. Her whole family has a unique pride that I have seldom seen in most communities that I visited. They are a closely knit family. They have struggled together over the years. They work together, they love, and they take care of one another. When I was last visiting her, she had just come out of the hospital, and a lot of the family was just around. And I saw that as a wonderful opportunity to document and make a photograph for the family of 4 generations of women. Because of my migration patterns of black people, sometimes it's very difficult to find that many generations living that close together. They love the land, they live close to the land, and it was just really a wonderful experience to kind of know them, meet them, and photograph them.
All right, come on, look at me. Hey, look at me. All right.
I don't think of these people like most anthropologists or folklorists would think of the people who they're working with. I don't think of these people as my subjects or informants. These are folks who are friends of mine. I come from a poor background, and so my early photo essays on black life reflect the background from which I come, because it was what I was most familiar with and what I was most concerned with. I've tried in my work to photograph poor people, but photograph them with dignity. You see, too many photographers go for the cheap, sensational way of doing things because the popular media has always wanted it. I believe that a person can be poor, but they are still somebody. All these people you see in my work are working. That's important. America would not be the strong country it is now had it not been for the fact that in its early years or its early stages of development, there was free black slave labor. So I maintain that these people are just as important in this culture as anyone else, and I will always focus on them.